In so many ways, media has become one of the most important things that exists in humanity right now. It doesn't matter if it's movies, TV shows, or music. We all love our media, and in a sense, it defines who we are as people. It reflects our ideas, our ambitions, and our interests. And one thing I certainly like to do is gather all of my media together and serve it out from a central system on my network. That way, I can access it from any device in my home, or indeed when I'm away. Now recently, I showed you how to build a NAS out of a Raspberry Pi 5 and control that using OpenMediaVault. But it left a lot of processing power off the Raspberry Pi 5 on the table. So this time, I'm going to make use of that and install a media server on my NAS. Let me show you how. Hello once again, Pi geeks and techno nerds all around the world. My name's Jeff, and I'm an IT professional who's been in the industry for over 30 years. In my spare time, I love to put together interesting little projects with Raspberry Pis, and I want to share some of those with you. If you like what you see on this channel, please hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe if you want to see more, and hit that notification bell so you can be told when I put a new video out. And also, let me know in the comments both how you get on with this video and any ideas that you've got for other projects that you'd like to see me do in the future. In my most recent videos, I put together a NAS using a Raspberry Pi 5, a SATA controller card, and a PCI Express adapter to link the two together. I then used OpenMediaVault as software to control the NAS and define services on it. Now all of this worked brilliantly, but it left a lot of processing power available on the Pi 5. This got me thinking, how can I make use of that? And one of the obvious things was installing some media server software. And it turns out OpenMediaVault supports this no problem. So not only will I be making some use of that spare processing capacity, but it will also enable the media server to access the content directly from the hard drives connected, rather than having to access those over the network, which, as we found in the previous video, is the bottleneck of the system. Now, just before we carry on, one thing I want to point out is that since I made my original videos on building the NAS, there are some new products available that could make it a little bit cheaper for you to build your own. The first of this is from Pineberry, who have now rebranded themselves as Pine Boards. This is a board that connects directly to the Raspberry Pi 5 and then exposes a PCI Express interface on the top of it. When I built my NAS, I was using another board produced by Pineberry that allowed an NVMe device to be connected directly to the Pi. I was then using a separate M.2 to PCI Express adapter that connected to that board in order to provide the PCI Express socket. And I was then plugging my SATA controller card into that. So by using this board, you can replace those two components with one. But indeed, you can actually take this further. There's a company called Radsa who have released this. This is another Raspberry Pi 5 hat. This connects directly to the Raspberry Pi 5 PCI Express port and exposes 4 SATA ports directly. So this would not only replace the NVMe adapter I was using before, but also the PCI Express adapter and the SATA controller card. So by using this, it will be a much simpler and cleaner solution. Now functionally, it won't be any different to what I've built already, so I'm not going to pick one of these up, as I can use what I have absolutely fine. But if you're building something like this from scratch, it may be a good idea to take a look at this new hardware that's available. Now the software that I'm going to be using for this media server is called Jellyfin. And here you can see the homepage of the product. It's completely free and provides an entire media solution with the ability to share out your movies, TV shows, music, live TV, books, photos, and pretty much anything else that you want. It's a really great product. I've been using it for some time and I absolutely adore it. Now we're going to be installing that using Docker. Now OpenMediaVault make this really easy, as they provide a plugin that allows Docker containers to be run directly from the OpenMediaVault software. So let's go and take a look at how to install all of this. Now just before we start installing everything, I want to stress I am going to be building on top of the projects that I've been doing in prior videos. Therefore, if you don't already have your NAS set up on OpenMediaVault, please take a look at this video here and it will take you through step by step the process. It's pretty straightforward, but it does take quite a while, so it wouldn't be good just to go through all of that again here. Now, in order to be able to get Docker support within OpenMediaVault, we need to install the Docker software on the Raspberry Pi to begin with. Now, in previous videos, I've just accomplished this simply by running sudo apt install docker compose. However, in this case, the OpenMediaVault software requires that you install the Docker Community Edition, and installing this is a little bit more complex. However, there is someone who's come to our rescue. If you go to this website here, you can find a number of scripts have been provided. Now, the first two of these enable us to install Docker Community Edition directly onto our Pi 5. Links to this website and everything else you see in this video will be in the description below. If we click through to the first script, click on the raw button so we go only to the script content, and then we grab the URL and make a copy of it. We can then just switch to our Raspberry Pi. In this case, I've just logged into it using SSH, and we can then use wget to grab that particular script. Now that's downloaded, all we have to do is make it executable and run it. Now that's complete, let's go back to our browser, go back to the list of scripts, take the second file, again, go to the raw version, and just repeat the process. So grab a copy of the URL, return to your Raspberry Pi 5, and then use wget to download it. And again, make that executable, and then run it. Now, following this, just like whenever else I've installed Docker from the command line, you have to add your user to the Docker user group. And then log out and log in again. Now I'm logged in again, we can prove that Docker is working okay by running the Hello World Docker container. And that worked just fine. We can also check that Docker Compose is installed just by running it in isolation. And again, that's just given us the help text, but it does show that Docker Compose is installed. But now we can go ahead and install the Docker Compose plugin on our OpenMediaVault system. At the end of the last video, we had our OpenMediaVault system all set up with some storage, shared folders present, exposing our NAS area, which was a RAID 5 collection of disks exposing a 4 terabyte space, and a backup disk that we could use to back up all of our data once a week. We then had SMB or CIFS configured with some shares to expose our NAS across the network, and a job under rsync to take a backup once a week on a Sunday. So now we can go back to the system settings and plugins and install the Docker Compose plugin for OpenMediaVault. Just go to the search and type in Compose. This will bring up the OpenMediaVault Compose plugin. Just select it and hit the down arrow to install it. Confirm that and it will kick off. Now that's complete, we can close the window. But before we can actually set up any containers, we need to set up a storage area for Docker Compose to use. So here we go back under Storage, Shared Folders, and we hit the plus. Then we give this a name, I'll just call it Docker Compose. We select a file system, and this will be our RAID 5 area. Create a directory underneath that to store all of our data. I'm fine with that default. And just for completeness, so it gives us a little tag on the UI, I'm just going to create a Docker Compose tag for this. And then hit save. As with anything in OpenMediaVault, when you make a change, you've then got to confirm it by hitting the tick and then clicking the yes button. Now that's all done, if we go to Services, we now have a Compose option. We can open that up and go to Settings. All we need to change here is the shared folder that's going to be used for its data. So we can just click on there and then select that Docker Compose area we just created. All of the rest of the information is fine, so we can just scroll to the bottom and hit save. And again, confirm the change. Now we can go back to the Compose menu and select Files. And here we want to create our Jellyfin application definition. But before we can, there's a couple of things that we need to change on the file system. So let's switch back to our terminal for a second. Now we're back on our terminal session. If we go to our mnt/nas area, which is our RAID 5 volume, and we then do a directory listing of everything, what we can see is that our new directory for the Docker Compose files that we created in the UI is owned by root, and that's fine. However, there's some other directories that we need to create here. Firstly, we need an area that Jellyfin can use for its configuration and cache information. Now I've pre-created these directories, so if I do a recursive listing under there, you can see what they look like. There's a subdirectory called cache and there's a subdirectory called config. However, all of these are currently owned by root. I need all of these to be owned by the user Pi, because that's the user that I'm going to configure our Jellyfin container to run as. Equally, I've got a place on the hard drive called media that I'm going to use to store all of our media. And I need that to be owned by Pi as well. So let's do that now. Now we can see that everything is owned by Pi, so it should work just fine. Let's go back to OpenMediaVault now and actually start creating the container. Now, in our Compose area, we can click on Files, Plus, and then Add. And here we can create our new Jellyfin application. So we'll just give it a name, Jellyfin, a description, Jellyfin Media Server. And then we just need to paste in our Docker Compose file. I've already got that prepared, so I'll just paste it in here. The first line of this just defines the version of Docker Compose that we're going to be compatible with. We then create a list of services. In our case, there's only going to be one, and that's going to be called Jellyfin, and we define that in this line here. The image line defines the Docker container that we're going to actually run. In this case, Jellyfin provide their own container that we can access directly. We then give that a friendly name that we can access at runtime if we need to. And here is where we configure the user ID and group ID that is going to run the software within the container. Now this is why I just changed the ownership of those directories on our file system to the user Pi. That has user ID 1000. So this way we know that the system will be able to access those directories with no problem. I then configure to use the network mode host. This is technically speaking not great. Normally you'd leave this to be the normal network system and you'd expose whatever ports Jellyfin needs to expose. Using host network mode is just a little bit easier to configure. We then define a number of directories that are going to be mounted into the container. The first two of these just contain the Jellyfin configuration and cache information. This is to ensure that every time we restart the container, we don't have to reconfigure it from scratch. The last three directories are just where we're actually going to store the media. We then define the restart policy for the container. In this case, we're saying that unless we explicitly stop it, we're going to allow OpenMediaVault to restart the container if it stops. This way, if it crashes, OpenMediaVault will restart it automatically for us. We then provide the definition of the URL that can be used to access the Jellyfin server. Now, if I were exposing this to the internet, I need to put some form of internet visible IP address or host name in here. However, in my case, I'm only accessing this internally or over a VPN, so using the internal IP address is just fine. The last piece of config here just instructs Jellyfin to use the internal host gateway to send its network packets around. This is just to ensure that nothing gets lost. Now, all I have to do is click Save. And that creates our Jellyfin application. I can now just click that and then hit the up arrow to bring the service up. And here you can see the status says that the server is now up. So we should now be able to go to Jellyfin and start configuring it. Now here, I've just entered as a URL the IP address of my Raspberry Pi :8096. This is the port that Jellyfin listens on, and here you can see the result is that I now get the Jellyfin setup page. Here, I just want to select that I'm going to use the English language, and now I just need to create a user that I can use to access the Jellyfin service. So I'm just going to call this Jellyfin, and I'm going to use a password of Jellyfin. And hit next. Now I get the opportunity to set up my media libraries. I'm actually going to do this a bit later, so right now I'm just going to hit next again. Now, as you'll see in a little bit, metadata is critically important to Jellyfin, and it's something that makes it very different to other media servers. So here, I'm going to say that my language is English, but the country I'm in is here in the United Kingdom. I'm going to allow remote connections to the server so I can access it from other devices on my network. And then it says I'm all done, so I can just hit the finish button. It now asks me to sign in, so I just need to provide that Jellyfin user credentials that I did earlier. And click sign in. And here you get a very boring looking page, and it makes sense because we haven't configured anything yet. So let's start adding our media libraries. First off, let's think about movies. Now, if you want to use Jellyfin to its fullest potential, you need to use some very specific directory and file naming conventions. So let's just go back to our terminal for a second and I'll show you what I mean. Here, if I go into my media directory, I now have directories for movies, music, and TV shows. I'm going to start with movies here. If I go into my movies directory, here you can see I've got a number of files in here. And they're all named pretty consistently. So they all start with the name of the movie, and then in brackets, it has the year that the movie was made. Now what's amazing is if I go back to my browser and I hit the little hamburger menu in the top left and select dashboard, this now gives me access to all of the configuration within Jellyfin. If I go to libraries and add media library, I now want to say that my content type is movies. I want to display that as movies, and I'm going to hit the plus against folders, and I'm going to select /media/movies as the directory for it to use. I'm then going to hit OK, and then scrolling down, I want my preferred download language to be English, and my country to be United Kingdom. It's really important that you have this box here of enable real-time monitoring to be checked. With that, it means if you drop any new file into that directory, it will automatically be picked up by Jellyfin. A little further down, there's an option to automatically refresh metadata from the internet. Set this to every 30 days. And this way, if any of the data gets updated on the internet, it'll automatically get set for you. I then just want to hit OK. Now the next thing I want to do is click the button labelled Scan All Libraries. And this will start the process of scanning the library and adding all of the files it finds into your Jellyfin repository. And now that this is all complete, I can hit the home link again, and you see I now have movies available. And look at what it's done here. It's pulled down all of the thumbnails for the movies that it's found. If I click into here, you can see all of those presented in an almost Netflix style way. And I can select any of these movies and start playing them. Now I'll keep the sound off here just because I don't want to get any copyright strikes or anything, but you get the idea. If I go back to the list of movies here and then I click on the title for any of them, you can see it takes me to this page where it's already pulled a list of all of the cast in the movie along with their images, information about what the movie's about, even ratings from Rotten Tomatoes about how good it is. And all of this has just been derived by putting the file in the right place and naming it correctly so that the system can search on it. Next, let's have a look at TV shows and how you do the same thing there. In our terminal session here, I'm now going to move into the directory that we use for TV shows. And here you can see that I've got a TV show called Waiting for God, and there's a folder just named that. If I go in here, I then have a directory that is specifically for the season of that series that I've got stored. In this case, I've got season 5. And in here, I've got the individual episodes. And each of these is named with the title of the program and then an identifier saying what season and episode the video file represents. Now we can just import this straight into Jellyfin. So if I go back to my browser and now head back to the hamburger menu and select dashboard again, we go back to libraries and add a media library. This time I can say that the content type is shows and that the folder I want to add is the media shows folder. And I then just have to hit OK. I then set the library settings just as I did for movies. So I want the language to be English and the country to be United Kingdom. Just as before, enable real-time monitoring to ensure that anything new gets added automatically. And again, automatically refresh metadata from the internet every 30 days so that you can keep your metadata up to date. And then hit OK. Again, this will cause a scan to happen. And just as before, once that's complete, if we go back home, we now have these shows available and we can see Waiting for God has now got its thumbnail. And if I click into this, you can see again, it's pulled all of the information about the series from the internet. Shows us all of the cast who are in it, tells us what seasons we've got available, and if we click into that, we can see the individual episodes and all of their metadata. And we can select any of these to play out.
No, it isn't.
And again, I'll stop that before I get any copyright strike. Now the last thing I want to show you is how to add music. It's done in a very, very similar way. Now following on from movies and TV shows, how we configure music isn't going to be any surprise. If I go back to our terminal and then look at our music directory, all you do is set up a directory that contains the artist name, and then within there, the names of all of the albums, and then within each album directory, you have the individual tracks. Now for all of these tracks, the numbering is actually included within the metadata of each file, so you don't need to set those specifically. And if I go back to Jellyfin, and I go back to the hamburger menu, dashboards, libraries, and add media library, I can now select my music library, add a folder, in this case, it's /media/music, and hit OK. Set my library settings as English and country United Kingdom. And then make sure that my metadata is refreshed from the internet every 30 days. And hit OK. And again, this will scan all of the library, which should be pretty quick. And now that's done, I can just click on Home. And now I have a music directory shown in Jellyfin. If I click on there, you can see my album here. I can click on the name of it and it will bring back all of the information about that album. And here you can see that it's put all of the tracks in their correct order. And I can select play to play that, but I won't right now because again, I want to avoid any copyright strikes. But as you can tell, if you put your entire collection of movies, TV shows and music onto your NAS, you can then use Jellyfin to expose that across your network in a really lovely and friendly way. The UI is great. But you don't only have to access this from a browser. Here, I'm on a Roku streaming stick, and on here I've installed the Jellyfin app. Now if I open this up, it will scan across my network and show me all of the servers that I've got running. Now here you can see the second one is my NAS. So if I just select that, and then I enter the username and password, and then click on Submit, this will log into my Jellyfin app on my Roku. And you can see all of the same content is exposed. So I can go to my movies, and it will show my movie library, and I can play anything that I want to. I can go to my music, I can select an album that I want to play, and I can start playing it. Equally, I can go to my shows, I can select the show that I want to watch, and I can start playing that.
Never allowed to yellow, with an S pen that has no ugly cast.
So here you can see you can make all of your media available across your home network and play it on whichever device you want. The Jellyfin app is available on Roku, Amazon Fire Stick, Google TV, just about any platform you can think of. It's really well supported and it's wonderful software. Now Jellyfin does have plugin support for TV Headend. And if you remember back to my video here that talked about setting up IPTV on your home network, you may remember I used TV Headend for that. And the integration with Jellyfin is pretty good, so that then from any client system you can access your live TV from that. However, I found a real downside with that. Now what's meant to happen is that when you access live TV from your client system, be it browser or whatever, Jellyfin will just go ahead and pull the video stream directly from the video source and then play it out. However, what I found is when you use the TV Headend plugin within Jellyfin, it causes some transcoding to happen on the device that it's running on. Now with the Raspberry Pi 5, it doesn't have any hardware encoding support built into the operating system, even though technically it is available within the GPU. And this then creates a big CPU bottleneck on the Raspberry Pi 5. So if you want to set up your live TV server running TV Headend on your NAS, definitely do it, but run it as a separate container and expose that as a completely separate service to Jellyfin. I don't recommend integrating the two. This way, all of your live TV streams are accessed directly from their source, and it doesn't create a big processing overhead on the Raspberry Pi itself. But that's it for this video. If you liked what you saw, please click that thumbs up button, subscribe to see more, and hit that notification bell so you can be told when I put a new video out. Let me know in the comments how you get on with this project. And also, if you've got any ideas for any projects you want to see me do in the future, put those in there as well. Anyway, thanks so much for watching till the end, and until next time, bye for now.